morning, everyone. Today is Thursday, March 11th, 2021. The time is 11 a.m. This is a special meeting to consider human resource personnel changes. Calling this meeting to order, attending are Commissioners Duncan, Brooks, and Filios. Do we have any changes to the agenda? No changes. Moving on. What we'll do in the interest of time and expediting the process, we'll take up item number 3 on the agenda first, which is a request for overtime land records division by the assessor. Betty, are you taking this one?
I am.
Go right ahead.
Okay, so we have a deadline at the end of March to get all the documents and plats processed for the assessment roll. And we're a little overwhelmed, and we're looking at, I have a commitment from the staff for about 62 hours, which equates to about $2,500, just to get this all taken care of on the roll and processed accordingly.
Okay. Anyone else? Sylvia, Kim, anything to add? Leslie?
No, it looks like it's going to be covered by their budget. So.
By their budget. Okay. Bill?
Oh.
You're fine? Okay then.
Just fine.
I'm good too. Motion.
I move that we approve the request for overtime for Land Records Division in the Assessor's Office.
I second the motion. Aye.
Aye.
Aye, and the motion is carried. So that takes care of item number 3.
Thank you.
You're very well. Thank you, Betty. Why don't we do this? Let's move on to item 4. I think I'm gonna leave the KCSO to the end so we have a little bit more time. So item number 4 is exception to policy 120 by our treasurer, Steve Matheson, who's been interviewing for the position for deputy treasurer. And Steve, do you want to come forward, please? And if necessary, we can certainly go into exec.
Let me hand out some.
The projections? Yeah.
Yep, we got them.
So what I'll do is I'll ask you, do you have any questions? I can go into any details that you would like. If we do go into details, I would request that we go into executive session.
Sure. So it's just a $6,000 a year increase in your budget going forward?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Without getting into the specifics or certainly names of the individuals, how many are you? Did you completed the interview process?
And that's, again, I don't want to go into details because there are some internal candidates that.
Oh, okay. All right. Does anyone see any need to go into exec to discuss any of the candidates or for Treasurer Matheson to share whatever might be sensitive? No?
I'm fine.
Any concerns with the proposal?
No.
None? Motion.
I move that we approve the exception to policy 120 for the treasurer not to exceed the amount provided.
I second the motion. Aye.
Aye.
Aye, and the motion is carried. Thank you, Steve. Okay, one more out of the way. Okay. All right then, so why don't we go to, let's go back up to item 1, which is a request for COVID-19 leave time restatement of accrued hours, KCSO. Dan, is this yours? Yes, sir. Under Sheriff Matos, take it away, Dan.
To save time, again, a memo should have been sent to
Yes.
the board, and I'm just going to ask the board if they've had a chance to familiarize themselves with that memo. Well, rather than going through the whole thing all over again, if you're familiar with the contents of the memo, basically, at least in the view of the sheriff and I, this is an issue of fairness. You know, almost a year ago at this time, we were immersed in what are we going to do with this pandemic. There was latitude given by the commissioners about, how to best deal with this. The latitude was given to the individual electeds. And, in that latitude was given the opportunity to give people admin time off for COVID. The FFRCA came up later on, and it did have some limitations on it, which excluded first responders. So it was a confusing time for all of us. So now flash forward up until early February of 2021, we had an employee, and since then I believe there's a total of 3 or 4 employees who have came forward saying, look, some people in the county were given admin time, but because we were first responders, we've been penalized because of the FFRCA reimbursement issue, and they wanted to be made whole and have that time returned to their sick time. That time was taken out of their sick time balance. So the remedy that I sought was to try to allow for a non-compensable bank of hours not to exceed the actual time that they took off, be placed or be retained by the sheriff's office. So if they have some sick time and it would be limited only to sick time, they could draw from those hours. And I think it was a goodwill gesture in terms of allowing them to have that time back. If they quit, they would not be reimbursed for it. It has no compensation or no monetary value. So I ran that by Darren Murphy, and when I got through talking with Darren, he said that, well, I don't want to speak for Darren about his opinion about the idea. However, he said this needed to be an issue that's most appropriately brought before the board. So short of any questions, I'll let Darren speak to it. Yes, sir.
Go right ahead, Darren.
Yes, the commissioners may recall the board back in April, they provided all of the electeds with the discretion.
You want to
Can you hear?
Yeah, thank you.
With the discretion to provide, I think it was up to 80 hours of admin time off. So it appears out at the sheriff's office and maybe some other departments that that discretion wasn't utilized. And now the new sheriff would like to utilize that for some of those employees who were not granted administrative time off. So the way to do it is the board would have to approve that. And we've discussed a process wherein the time would not, well, we can't go back and restore sick leave hours if that's the board's discretion. So we would have to do some sort of sick compensatory time off, and so that it's budgetary neutral as best as we can be, it would be unpaid if they were to leave the county.
Okay.
That's exactly how we see it as well. It's non-compensable, but in good faith, we just carry a second set of books for them only with respect to the time they used during COVID.
Okay, so, so basically what you're trying to do here is add the hours as compensatory time?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Well, it's sick time.
It's
not-
sick time, yeah, okay.
And there is a need to make a distinction between that, because I don't want to give them hours they can take for anything.
Right.
They took it off for
Right.
something related to
Right.
an illness, it needs to remain in that vein.
Okay. And so the calculation comes out to just about $9,400? Yeah. Yeah, I'm looking at Dina's calculations, yeah. It's a dollar value.
Yep.
Okay.
But if we give it back, I want to be clear, we expect no, that there is no, I want to be clear in saying there is no dollar value to this.
Okay.
They know it going into it. It's the best we can do. I think it's the fair thing to ask the board to do. But if they get no dollars back, if they quit tomorrow, there's no compensation.
Understood. Okay, fair enough. Thoughts, Leslie?
Well, I really struggle with this because this was a decision that was up to the former sheriff. And I respect the fact that our new sheriff would like to do something different. But at this point, I definitely don't want to do anything that's going to trigger an audit. And I think the auditor has talked about material misstatements in the financials. So I want to make sure that that definitely does not happen. The other thing is, I mean, this could open up the door to any decision made by a former elected official who's not here anymore. So that's kind of where I'm looking at a bigger picture and not just the specifics of the 4 individuals, but how many other of former Sheriff Wolfinger's decisions are going to be brought up as, you know, unfair or anything like that. So I do sympathize with those, but I'm not sure really how to go forward at this point.
Well, Commissioner, what I would say about this is limited. And what's before you is what's before you. And I can't predict what's going to happen 6 months or 6 days or 6 minutes from now. But this is an issue of fair play. It's treating our employees right. This decision that the sheriff decided to undertake back a year ago was done under a very confusing time. And I might say that there's anecdotal information that says that other departments have had some issues as well, trying to figure out what to do. We're just trying to right a wrong and I don't even need to say that it's a wrong, but I think these employees would see this as a goodwill gesture, not just by the sheriff, but by the Board of Commissioners. We're not giving them a dime. We're just giving them time off if they get sick, to replace what they used.
So I guess my question would be, in general, do elected officials have the discretion to use admin time, or is there a policy that they can only use admin time under certain circumstances?
There's not a policy. Well, there's no short answer to that. Yes, there is some ability for the elected officials, in particular the sheriff's office, because they're for cause, to utilize admin time. But in this context of COVID, no, they needed the board approval, and the board did give that approval back in April, I believe.
Right.
Up to 2 weeks.
Okay. Regarding the question of restatement, which could be pretty significant in this case, Dina, do you want to, would you mind if, do you want to talk to that for a moment? Thank you, Dan.
So I think in the context of the big picture, this particular instance is pretty small. From a restatement standpoint, we can't go back, like Dan
Right.
said, we can't go back in time. We've already given W-2s. The tax year is closed, even though it's still in the fiscal year, the tax year is closed. So this would be something where the undersheriff referred to it as off book, but basically it would be a 1-for-1 instead of pulling from someone's sick bank, which is on our books as a liability. This liability wouldn't actually be a true liability, because if the person left, we wouldn't be paying out that sick leave into a VEBA account. It is for accounting purposes that those accruals are gone. This would be more of an agreement between the sheriff and the employee that, okay, if you need to take sick time off, we have these sick hours, or have the character of sick hours you can use that won't pull from your accruals. But as Commissioner Duncan stated, my concern is this could open up a lot more of this, and it could get big. So I think it's a bigger decision than just this instance, but as far as costing the county, it's just kind of a 1-for-1. The liability is kind of done at this point. So we don't have to worry about a restatement.
And it's mostly going forward? Yeah. Bill, thoughts?
You know, it's where it gets difficult. We get to say, and
You might want to get in closer.
regardless of what we decide to say, there can be liability for different decisions. And I don't think I'm willing to base a matter of fairness on what could or might happen down the road.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'm sympathetic to this. I understand the situation, and some decisions we make run the danger of setting precedent. I don't necessarily see that in this case, because COVID was a highly unusual situation. That's not to say that we don't run into an emergency situation of another type in the future, but I think we deal with it as it comes along. Again, I see this as being virtually budget neutral, and it's a concession going forward, so I don't have a problem with it. Leslie, did you?
Is there any legal concern about having a second set
Yeah,
of
that's a good point.
books?
So the way we're going to do it, the way we should do it, is with an agreement with the individual employees so that there is no issue.
Okay. I'm sorry, Sylvia, did you want to say? Yeah, by all means.
Just a couple of,
Pull it in.
comments
There
or
you go.
clarification that we'll need. If we're restoring those hours, can we ask the employee with the sheriff's office to have them use those hours first, clear that book, that set of books first, then they use their regular hours? Okay, so it kind of gets washed out quickly. The other thing, I had a second thing there, I can't think of what it was.
Okay, so use
Oh,
those-
how will we treat them? So our current temporary COVID policy for sick leave says if you've used 80 hours way back to April when the policy was in effect, those hours are, they don't get another 80 hours for COVID leave, so we would need clarification on that because now all of public safety is included in the temporary sick leave policy. So how do you want us to handle that? I would recommend we treat them the same as if they use their COVID leave,
Yep.
paid, and they don't get an additional 80 hours.
Yeah,
Makes sense.
I would have to agree with that.
Makes sense. Everybody's nodding.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. And I will be bringing back that temporary policy at the next HR meeting to
Okay,
discuss
fine.
it with you again.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion?
How do you want the motion to be, Darren? Do we have to
Yeah.
name the individuals or,
No, just to approve the memo,
okay,
Okay.
and then for staff to proceed, discuss, that's the
right. the
individual
agreement.
agreements.
Right, and should we indicate that those hours, as Sylvia recommended, be used first?
Yeah, certainly, yes.
Okay, all right. Leslie, you okay?
I suppose. All right. I move that we approve the memoed request for hours to be, reinstated is the wrong word.
Or hours to be reserved as
Reserved. Thank you.
compensatory sick time.
Reserved as compensatory sick time, which to be used first and in place of any further COVID leave.
Shall be unpaid if the employee leaves before they are used.
And shall be unpaid if the employee leaves before they are exhausted.
Good job, good, okay.
I second the motion. Aye.
Aye.
Aye, and the motion is carried. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, so that took care of item number 1. So item number 2, holiday payout, KCSO. Dan?
Again, I believe you have the memo that I submitted, so without going through all the nuts and bolts, I'll summarize. And I'll go back to mid-2020. I was doing what I'm supposed to do and watching the books on things, and I saw that there was a heck of a lot of holiday time being held on the books.
Can you get closer to the mic? Is it, okay.
Yeah, there was a lot
Thank you.
of holiday time banked, and it was a liability. And so I gave instruction to our commanders to reduce that liability because, in theory, you know, if all those people would have left all at once, which probably would have never happened, but in theory, it was a liability that could have caused the county a great deal of financial stress. So with that said, they did, the commanders and our troops, they did a good job bringing that time down to, and the goal was to have it, as I recall, down to about 100 hours. So with very few exceptions, they did a good job of getting that down. Well, since that time, there's been some of our employees that have come forward asking to once again be able to bank that time. And we created, I don't want to say it's a policy, but we amended the practice to say, or we wanted to amend the practice to say that we would allow them to retain up to about 120 hours, or actually not more than 120 hours during a calendar year, and that during that period of time, budget pending, I mean, you know, our budget permitting, we would compensate them for the so-called holiday buyback, which usually happens late in the year, for not more than 40 hours. So we moved to adopt the practice of allowing them to keep 120. And again, if they went over 120, it would just get paid into their paycheck, just like it is now. So we're going to be able to maintain a static, you know, they're not going to have 200 or 300 hours of holiday time banked up, the most that they would ever have, and it would probably be less than 120. So with that said, we talked to Darren Murphy, and once again, Darren said we have to ask you guys. And so that's what we're here today, is just to basically see if there's an issue whatsoever, and I'll let Darren speak to the other part of it, but if the board would grant that permission to allow us to have them retain 120 hours and the 40 hours budget, paid out budget permitting.
Yeah, Commissioners, I don't know if you have email opinion in front of you.
Right.
So the holiday policy, it doesn't authorize or allow for banking of any hours, doesn't contemplate that. And I do recall when that policy was adopted, revised from a former policy, the then sheriff and I think it was the solid waste department was having issues with banking hours. But for whatever reason, the practice changed out at the sheriff's office and they started banking holiday hours. So moving forward to do this, my recommendation, if that's what the board wants to do, is to change it countywide. There's only a couple other departments that this would affect, 24/7 operations. Solid waste, to a lesser extent than it used to be because they were open on more holidays. They are open on fewer holidays now than they were in the past. And then the juvenile detention center, they're a 24/7 operation. So we want to treat everyone at the county equally. So this sort of policy, if it's a benefits are under the sole purview of the board. If that's what the board wants to do, we can revise a new policy that would reflect that and allow for banking and use of holiday time. If it's managed the way that the sheriff's office wants to manage it, it should be budget neutral. Sheriff and I were talking about that. It really should be budget neutral, the proposed practice or policy.
Commissioners, and to touch on that as well, we're talking about an outfit that's a 24/7 operation. We all know that, over at detention and at JDC and in our patrol, we have cops and detention deputies working at the jail. But not only, I agree with Darren to the extent that it would be budget neutral, but it could actually even be more to the benefit of the coffers of the county in the sense that we could, they're wanting this time to take the time off. They're not wanting the time except for that 40 hours at the end of the year, I think I've heard a lot of people say they buy their Christmas presents with it. But whatever the case may be, there's probably a better chance of that time being burnt off rather than being paid in the paycheck if they bank it.
Except help me understand, but with the 24-hour operation, so if that person takes off, then we pay somebody time and a half to fill that shift. So that day is worth 2.5 times somebody's pay.
Potentially, I mean,
Not necessarily also.
yeah.
Some days when we're fat, when we can give.
Okay, without replacement.
Right, we would just like that opportunity to be able to do that.
What we don't want to do is ever get back to the point where we have people with almost 300 hours. And, I think this gave people kind of a sense of security to have that bank of hours sitting there, and I understand that. But we weren't managing it correctly, and that was on me.
Do you have anybody over 120 right now?
I couldn't answer you, but I don't think there's many. I can't tell you specifically, but the last time I looked, if my memory serves me correctly, it's probably 3 or 4 people were, but there's not many.
Okay. So Dina, did you want to talk?
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to say. Thanks, Dan.
So I guess when the policy is amended, I think we just want to be real specific on what constitutes the buyback. If the buyback is at a certain time of the year and it's a certain amount of hours, we want to make sure we budget appropriately for that. So looking back 3 years, and of course 2020 was a weird year, but we're under budgeting. We're using salary savings to pay for holiday buyback, but I think we really should look at what we think it's going to cost for holiday buyback and actually budget it just to be transparent. So that's all I have.
Okay. Come on, Dan. Thanks, Gina.
On that note, the time that the folks are holding on the books, again, we're saying it's never going to get more than 120. If it becomes more than 120, it goes into their paycheck as it's being done now. And I think the important thing to understand, and I think you do, but it needs to be restated, is that we're paying for this anyway. Either we're giving them time off, or if they work on the holiday, they're getting paid. So in an instance where they chose to bank it rather than get paid for it, well, ostensibly that's money in the county's pocket. So we pay for it one way or the other. We don't really budget for it. And, the other thing is that to call it holiday buyback, that may end up changing, at least in my view, because it depends on the availability of funds and how it sets up, with respect to how the budget was published and how much money is available at the time that we want to disperse that money.
Okay, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
I'm reading the third paragraph, and I think we need some clarity here. Maybe everybody understands, but I'm kind of struggling with it. Okay, it says, in short, the sheriff agreed to allow employees to bank not more than 120 hours at any given time, okay, which is essentially 3 work weeks, okay, and be allowed the opportunity to sell back not more than 40. So when you say they're banking 120, they're what? They're accumulating those 120 hours?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, they would be accumulating those 120 hours as the holidays come up.
Okay, so they can take them pretty much at their discretion and, of course, your approval.
It's like earning more vacation.
It's like earning more vacation. Okay, fine. And then it says, and be allowed the opportunity to sell back not more than 40 hours in a calendar year. So if they're selling it back, clearly they're getting paid for it.
Yes. For 40, yes, that's correct.
We're paying for it already. So the current policy is we're already paying them.
Okay, so they're not collecting 2 paychecks for
No.
that period.
No.
Okay, I want to make sure everyone understands that. Okay, or maybe that I do.
And, if they had 120 hours, it just went to 80 hours, just,
All right, okay.
okay?
Go ahead.
So I guess if there's agreement on the board that we want to look at changing the policy, then a new policy would have to be brought forth, and then we would vote on it at that time. But I'm not sure about the 120, if I would support that much, or if I would support a lesser amount.
If it becomes a county policy, that was our suggestion, that's what we were going to offer to our people until Darren told us we had to come talk to you guys, so.
I'd like to say something.
Yeah, come forward.
I should just keep my mouth shut.
No, Sheriff Mark.
There's a reason why that peace officers have a different retirement system than non-peace officers. So we are asking our people to work on holidays. Alls we want is the option to be able to give them the time off when they want to. So I don't really see this as a big problem.
It's only a problem because it conflicts with existing policy. So I think I heard that
Aaron,
we're
would you like
willing
to
to look.
Weigh in on this?
Go ahead,
It does
Darren.
conflict with the current policy. So the current policy doesn't allow, if the 4th of July, for example, that's all hands on deck, right?
Right, yeah, go ahead.
Everybody works. So 4th of July, what it contemplates is everyone works, nobody can take that as a holiday, but that you need to schedule and manage that and take that day off within the next 90 days. That's the way the current policy works.
Go ahead.
The proposed policy is that you can bank that 120 hours. How many holidays do we have in a year?
11?
10. We
10
have
or
10, so
11.
it's 80 hours though.
So 80. So it'd take a couple years to bank up those hours. So what it does offer some flexibility that, hey, less people are off and you're just paying them rather than taking the time off.
So if I understand you correctly, it basically lifts the 90-day expiration period? Is that what we're doing?
It lifts it,
Potentially.
and then it allows this additional compensation.
Okay,
So,
okay.
Yeah. But the sheriff's office is unique. So it's the sheriff's office, solid waste to a lesser extent, and
JD,
detention.
juvenile detention.
juvenile, but they don't have the same issues that patrol does. Patrol, there's holiday, like 4th of July, you just have to have everyone work
Yeah,
that
well,
holiday.
juvenile detention will just keep a normal schedule.
It's a normal schedule.
Normal
So those
schedule.
other departments is not as problematic. The sheriff's office is unique, but we do want to treat everyone the same, so a countywide policy makes sense. And it's not that much different than the old policy that predated our current policy.
And just for the record, though, there are municipalities that do treat law enforcement different because there are different situations that occur in law enforcement than in the clerk's office. So we are asking for that consideration, especially when it comes to holiday time, so they can take off time when they want with their families. And because we're telling them they can't have the time off when it is the normal holiday.
Yeah, I'm willing to look at a new policy.
So let me ask you, Darren, is there an issue with having two policies, one for the, if you will, the general pay plan and another one for KCSO? Does that present a problem?
It does. Patrol's unique, but the jail and the other staff out at the sheriff's office, not that much different than juvenile detention.
Uh-huh.
So we do want to treat those two departments the same.
Okay, so then to Leslie's point about revisiting the policy and making it a single policy for all, Sylvia, how much time would you need to take a look at this?
I'll work with Darren because I'll need to get the old policy and see how we can revise it and update it. Do you think a couple weeks, Darren?
Yeah, that'll work, Sylvia. Yeah.
Leslie, makes sense to you?
Yep.
Absolutely. Bill?
Does that work with the sheriff?
A couple weeks.
Yes.
So we could potentially schedule for 2 weeks from today, if that'll work,
Yeah, the
okay?
next
And then we can
HR
take it up.
meeting.
There you go. Okay, then, so we'll defer this for 2 weeks and,
So the
Proceed as-
direction Sylvia and I need is the number of hours banked.
yes.
So if you want us to leave that blank, want to give us some direction now?
I think you should take up the question of the number of hours banked, and I think there was also the question of, was it the 90 days? That
So
there was
90 days is on the current policy, so we won't have that on the new policy.
Okay, so basically you'll scrap that.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's really, how many hours do you want to bank?
Thoughts?
I'm fine with 120.
You're okay with 120, Sheriff? 120,
Go ahead, I'm sorry, Dina.
Yes,
wanted to-
that's reasonable.
okay. Leslie? you-
Dina, I don't know.
Dina? All right, then?
The
Okay.
full
Go-
120, Dina, or the 40?
If it's a liability on the books and we separate the employee, do we want that in the policy that we're gonna pay out the full accumulation? Or are we just doing that buyback 40 payout, no more than 40? So that's something to think about in the policy. How you wanna do that at separation, because if there's an accumulation of a lot of hours, are you gonna pay that full amount out at separation?
It would be the full amount, but we're paying it anyway.
Yeah.
We're paying it anyway if we don't institute this policy.
Okay, but if you're only giving 40 hours at once for a holiday buyback, if somebody leaves and they have 120, are you limiting that to 40 like you would on a holiday payout? Or are you
No, they would get the full 120
yeah,
because
they get
you
the
would have
full.
been paid for it anyway.
Yeah,
So
that's correct.
that's the only reason why 80 hours came up in my mind, just to prevent that high number being on the books. So that's why I considered 80.
So why don't you guys go off, do what you need to do, make a recommendation. If you feel it's 80 or 120, we can always make that decision at that point. Is that okay?
Yeah, good, yep.
Kind of my thought is it aligns with how many holidays we have per year and the number of hours we reimburse for is the 80. And then you could still look at the 40-hour payout, but we'll navigate that.
Okay, fair enough. Sheriff?
Sir, just because I have another meeting to go to, I'd like to sound a little bit of alarm here. We've had 6 of our 7 control room operator applicants call us in the last few days and withdraw because they can't afford to live around here with the pay. We've got significant vacancy in our dispatch center right now.
Excuse me, Sheriff, are we stepping outside the
Yeah,
agenda?
we should probably
Yep.
stay on task.
So just
Think about it.
sound the alarm
Okay,
that
okay.
we've got significant issues, public safety issues on the horizon.
Now, these are, just a quick question, these are 6 individuals that have interviewed, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Sounds like community development.
Yeah. It's
sorry.
just stand by.
Okay.
It's a public safety issue that's on the horizon, so.
Okay, thank you for sharing that,
thank you.
Sheriff. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, moving on. Okay. Final item, isn't it? Yeah, okay. Item number 5, Policy 600, Job Evaluation Classification, BOCC, this is something I had requested. Sylvia, you want to take this on? Yes. Thank you, gentlemen. Go ahead, Sylvia.
All right, so the board had tasked HR, and with legal's assistance, we've developed a revised policy for your review. And the key component to the revisions were that we were going to eliminate the 1 week period, comment period, that we would need to send it out to the elected officials for review. What we incorporated into that policy, and it'll be under section, let's see, what is that? 5, and it's now referenced 5D. And in that we say, at a public meeting, the elected official, department head, whoever's asking for the change, and HR present the recommendation of reclassification or initial classification to the Board of County Commissioners for final decision. So we're removing that week period, comment period. At the public meeting, people can comment on the proposed reclassification or initial classification of a job. And we also just cleaned up some of the language, just some housekeeping that needed to be done in reference to the policy. One other thing I wanted to point out under 5A, we, for the Board of County Commissioners departments, we had incorporated that if a reclassification or initial classification was being done, seeking 2 signatures on it, but I don't know if that's what you want, before it comes to HR for review, or if you want to just, or if it's one is good enough. And Darren has reviewed the policy for us and maybe has some comments related to it.
Go ahead, Darren.
The revisions are good. They actually better reflect what Idaho law is, that it's really the board's purview. So having it go out to the electeds really didn't make much sense when it's your decision.
Okay, fair enough. Now, when you say 2 signatures, go ahead.
So when we have the departments fill out their request for reclassification, we seek the elected official or department's head signature on it. So in the BOCC's case, we would be asking for 2 signatures instead of just 1.
So 2 of us instead of 1. Okay.
How do you feel about that? And do you want that?
Yes, yep, that.
Okay.
I think it's a good idea.
Okay.
Okay.
By the way, good job.
Thank you.
You
It's
shortened
team
this
effort.
quite a bit. Wow.
Kim and Darren, and I think Dave a while back had some input into it, so it's a team effort. Thank you.
Any thoughts? Leslie, are you okay with it?
I'm good.
Bill, are you okay? Motion, please.
I move that we approve the new rewritten policy 600 for job evaluation classification.
I second the motion.
Bill Brooke?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, and the motion is carried.
So I believe I have to bring it to a business meeting for the resolution, so that'll be forthcoming.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Darren. Very helpful, as usual.
I
Appreciate
would,
it.
Yeah.
Dina,
And then we
thanks.
at least have it. Okay.
Thank you, ladies. Good job, HR. Oh, public comment?
I do.
Hearing none?
I have some- I have some
Oh, I'm
public
sorry.
Hello, excuse me.
I apologize.
It's not a big deal, but it could be for somebody. I just got word that the Coeur d'Alene CBOC, the Coeur d'Alene VA Clinic, is opening vaccinations to any veteran right now of any age, and you can bypass their atrocious phone tree by dialing 208-665-1715 and get right to the scheduler. That's all.
Good news.
Hold it, don't leave yet. You missed that one.
Oh, I missed one. Story of my life.
Okay, so that means now we're adjourned, right? Okay, so it's 11:43, meeting adjourned. Thanks, everyone.